So right now, a trade war has begun, and as we've just discussed,
you're wrong there. It's just dead wrong.
Why that?
Because the trade war has not just begun. This is not a trade war. And Australia sees this. Australia is at the front lines of this. We're in an economic war with China, okay? Not a trade war. China's been economic war with the West, and they are a not authoritarian, they're a totalitarian mercantilist system. They always talk about this international rules-based order. The Chinese don't play by any rules. They don't have any internal rules. It's a completely totalitarian regime, not the Chinese people, the regime. Okay, what Donald Trump has said, he's the first president, because the elites in our country, just like the elites in Australia said, the rise of China is inexorable. It's the second law of thermodynamics. Do you know what Trump said? I don't think so. Trump has been arguing this for 30 and 40 years. What Donald Trump has done is taken the United States government and said, hey, we're just not going to be a punching bag anymore. And that's why I keep saying Australia is the canary in the mine shaft. Australia can show you when good and decent people kind of play by the rules, and the next thing they look around, and many of the economic resources and economic assets of a country are owned by another country, and all of a sudden you start seeing influence operations on their politicians.
Well, let's
what's happening. Let's
just pull those pieces apart.
What Donald Trump did is to say, what the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take on trade in a scale that's never been done before.
How far do you think Donald Trump is prepared to go with $500 billion at stake?
All the way.
You know, the losers, if this trade war continues, and if you don't want to call it a trade war, that's up to you, but the rest of the world is calling it a trade war. And if Can
I say something? The globalist and the globalist media propaganda machines are calling it a trade war, okay? It's been economic war. First off, please stop.
If there's a recession, who is it who loses their job?
By the way, recessions come and go. Okay, recessions come and go.
Yes, but if you lose your job, you lose the dignity of work, which is central to your agenda.
I think workers understand, and particularly people that back Donald Trump, that what he's trying to do is bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States and trying to reset this economy to the economy that we've had since the American system came up in the 19th century. They understand there could be some speed bumps on this, and that's what leadership's about. I mean, Donald Trump's actually gone to some of the states he won and said, hey, on the agricultural side, it could be some hits. Remember, China thinks of the United States and Australia in the same way. They think we're tributary states, okay? We're essentially Jamestown to their Great Britain. We send very few finished manufacturing goods and no high value-added manufacturing goods, right? We essentially send natural resources, agricultural products, copper and tin, what's extracted from the earth. And all Donald Trump is saying is that that's not the natural law of physics. That was human action. Human agency that did that. Wall Street in our country were the guys that shipped those jobs over there. And what Donald Trump's saying is have a vibrant, robust economy. You have to make things. You have to make high value-added things.
And you're prepared to go through a recession in order to achieve that? Is that what you just said?
I think the country's prepared to do what the country has to do. I'm not trying to dismiss recessions. Certainly don't want it, but recessions are part of the business cycle. We've had it. We've had recessions come and go for the last 250 years.
I'm actually shocked to hear you say that, because what we know happens in recessions is that particularly older members of the workforce lose a job that they never get back again. That for someone who's for the working man, for the hobbits, as you call them.
I would love to have a system. I would love to have a system in capitalism that didn't have business cycles. So far, we haven't learned.
But you don't have to have a recession.
Look, by divine providence, we're now in a 10-year recovery, right? Now, part of that's because we infused the system with trillions of dollars of capital and lifted up the elites. The working guys haven't gotten that benefit. President Trump's economic policies, nobody's talking about a recession. In fact, today, the economists came out and they don't see any recession on the horizon, given his monetary, the dollar's the strongest it's ever been, or virtually strongest it's ever been.
I think the governor of the Bank of England said that the current trade policies that the United States has in play, and if they continue in this way, you could be looking at taking 1% off global growth, 2.5% off U.S. growth.
Okay, 2% off U.S. growth is now U.S. growth is projected at 5% or 4%.
So if you lose
2% is 3%.
You're prepared for that to happen in order to reset.
I think what economic nationalism, what President Trump is prepared for, is that in the reordering of the global supply chain, and that's what you're seeing. Put tariffs aside for a second. Look what's really happening. What you're having is a reordering of the global supply chain away from just solely of China being the manufacturer of the high-value annual manufacturer of everything. President Trump, who everybody dismissed as a rube, as everybody dismissed as a guy on Twitter that's so crude, okay? He's actually taking the long view. Okay? The Chinese look at this in hundreds of years. And we in the Judeo-Christian West, of which Australia happens to be at the tip of the spear in the Pacific, have to start thinking in generational cycles. What you should view, I think, China as, in a large extent, particularly of what they're doing in South Asia, what they're doing in sub-Saharan Africa, they're equivalent of the East India Company.
Yeah.
What they're trying to do is predatory.
When I say yes, I'm not agreeing. I'm nodding that I know what
Yeah,
the
but,
East India
but
Company is.
what it was,
Just to be clear.
predatory lending. What it tries to do is go to smaller countries or weaker countries, lend them money that they know they can't pay back.
Why wouldn't Australia, whose economy has benefited so much from its proximity to and deals with China, why wouldn't Australia seek to take advantage of what's going to become available through Belt and Road? They will do it. If it meets our standards, Australia will look to participate.
I think that's the whole point. It's like the United States. We want a relationship with China. We'll have a great relationship with China. But we want it on terms that we have our sovereignty and that people in our country, like people in Australia, make their decisions. Look, I'm a hawk. I'm a hawk on China. I'm a hawk on China because eventually I believe that this regime is not confronted. If this regime is not confronted, bad things are going to happen. And I think they have to be confronted now. I think they absolutely have to be confronted now. I think Turnbull has been way too much of an appeaser, and I think that's not going to turn out well. But here's the good news. Right now, you have a much more vibrant debate in Australia. And this is why I say you're a canary in the mine shaft. You have a much more robust debate in Australia than we're having here in the United States. In the United States, we're just starting that. And that's why I keep pointing to Australia. I say, look, these guys played by the rules. Look where the situation they are today. And many of the people who are comfortable with that are not comfortable today. And here's the beauty of it. It doesn't really deal with political ideology. You have many progressives down there saying, hey, we're quite upset about this. So I think it's going to play out very interestingly, and I think Australia's at the tip of the spear of this.